From the Fidelity Bank Foundation studio, PBS Kansas presents One-on-One with Victor Hogstrom.
This is where the trailblazers and change makers come to talk about life, success, and purpose. My guest this week is considered one of the most important African-American architects in the United States. His name is Charles Mcafee. He's a Los Angeles native and graduate of the University of Nebraska. In 1963, Mcafee started an architecture firm in Wichita and quickly gained national attention for both his modernist designs and his social activism in creating affordable housing. His high-profile works include buildings designed for the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, Wichita State University's Ulrich Museum of Art, and Wichita's McAdams Park swimming pool, which was recently renamed Mcafee Pool. He has now won numerous awards and served as president of the National Organization of Minority Architects. He has mentored other black architects, including his two daughters, who have taken over the family firm. Now in the twilight of his days, Charles Mcafee is reflecting upon his life, his legacy, and the societal changes he's seen over the course of his long life. This is an interview you don't want to miss as I go one-on-one with acclaimed architect Charles Mcafee. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'm thrilled to welcome the famous architect, former model, and former Nebraska basketball player, Charles Mcafee, to the program. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
We've heard so much about you and all your work, and you have some interesting stories to tell us. But you know, let's get the public to find out where you came from to have achieved all that you have done in your lifetime. So let's begin from the days you were growing up in Wichita.
Let me start a little bit before that.
Oh, okay.
My great-grandfather was wounded in the Battle of Petersburg, fighting for the Union Army. Went back to Philadelphia, got out of a military hospital, came back to Kentucky, picked his family up in a covered wagon, crossed Kansas City, which would be Kansas City later, stopped at the joint where the Little and the Big Arkansas River came together. That was my great-grandfather. My grandfather, my father, I'm the fourth generation, my daughter's the fifth generation. I was born in Los Angeles, California in 1932, Christmas. The reason for that was mom and dad, in the middle of the Depression, were looking for a job. Went to California, I was born 6 months later, they came back to Wichita, and I've been here ever since.
So as a black kid growing up here in the Wichita area, what were your aspirations? What was that dream? What did you want to become?
The dream was what my mom and dad did for the three of us. I had this brilliant, gorgeous sister that when she'd come home from school, we'd have dinner, she'd go to her room to study, and the house was quiet. My sister graduated top of her class at East High, top of her class at Wichita State. Well, it was Wichita University at the time. Could not get a decent job in Wichita. Went to Los Angeles and retired years later to come back home to take care of my mom. She was the head of the hematology outpatient clinic at UCLA Medical School. So she set the standard for my brother and for me. My brother graduated from Wichita University, but back then they were drafting us right out of school. So he went into service, but came out, got 2 more degrees from Kansas State, wanted to be a basketball coach. Nobody would hire a black kid basketball. Middle school, high school, didn't happen. That's when they decided I needed to get out of here and go up north. And that's why I ended up going to Nebraska. And we thought Nebraska would be different. The one thing Nebraska was different was they didn't have any black people. I mean, it was kind of like I had to go hunt for some.
Okay, so let's talk about your days at the University of Nebraska. You played basketball.
I wasn't supposed to. I'd promised my mom and dad no sports because I had 18 hours my first semester, including calculus, chemistry, and physics. My brother drove me up there and dropped me off. And freshman week, it was nothing for me to do. I went to play tennis. Nobody was over there playing. I came back by the gym, and there were some guys playing basketball, 2 against 2. Another guy showed up and said, "Hey, you play basketball?" I said, "Yeah." So I went over and I started playing with him for about half hour. There was a guy in the stands. He comes down, he says, "You go to school here?" I said, "Yeah, I just started." He said, "You coming out for the basketball team?" I said, "No." He said, "I think you ought to come out for the basketball team." I said, "Who are you?" "My name is Harry Good. I'm the basketball coach." So freshmen couldn't play varsity those years. So I went home for Christmas break. I walked in the door. My father was sitting in his easy chair reading Sports Illustrated. He says, "Who is this outstanding freshman guard from the University of Nebraska named Charles Mcafee?" I said, "Daddy, I was going to tell you and Mama." He said, "Wait a minute. That wasn't the deal. You talk about they want to give you some kind of scholarship or something. The deal was you study, we pay. You're the last of the 3. We're going to get you out of college too." I said, "Well, now you tell Mama." "No, I'm not going to tell your mother." So I went back to the kitchen. My mother had her hands in the dishwasher, washing dishes. She was about 5'2". I was talking to her, looking down at her. I told her the story. She very slowly turned and looked up at me. And I knew that the words getting ready to come out of her mouth were, "I want you to go out in that backyard, cut me the biggest switch you can find, and bring it in here to me." But she was gracious and did not do that.
So they allowed you to play basketball to continue?
They allowed me to go ahead and play. But I couldn't play south of K-State and KU.
You also had the pleasure of playing against Wilt Chamberlain.
Wilt came to Lincoln, and the Lincoln newspaper the next morning says, "Chamberlain fails to impress." Big headlines. And the reporter didn't know what he was talking about because he said Chamberlain fails to block any shots. But Wilt blocked a lot of shots. All he had to do was turn and look at us. And we knew damn good and well the ball wasn't going up to the basket because he would just swipe like he had a big racket in his hand. So my father, 2 weeks later, came up to Lawrence to see us play. Wilt and I are fraternity brothers. Wilt came out of the fraternity house and apologized to my daddy. He said, "Mr. McAfee, I'm sorry what we're going to have to do tonight." I'm going like, he said, "The coach plastered all of these Chamberlain fails to impress on my locker." So the score was about 19 all. I was guarding my man and broke for a rebound. Thought he was shooting, but he wasn't shooting. Passing the ball to Chamberlain. Chamberlain was straight up in the air. His knees were going by my eyes. I looked up. I said, "I had no business being out here. I know I'm going to be an architect." If I ever had any doubt before that, that was when it was sure. Mm-hmm. But by the time the game was over, they were 30 points ahead of us.
He did what he said, right?
Yeah, he did just what he said.
So you did do some modeling. Tell us the story about your modeling briefly.
When Price and I would go downtown to eat lunch.
Now Price, you said, and who's Price?
Price Woodard was the first African-American ever elected. I ran his campaign to the city council, and they rotated the mayors at that time. Right. And so he became the first African-American mayor. Well, we would go down, and what happened was I was modeling clothes for Henry's. So Mr. Levitt would always come, and we'd have lunch together with Henry Levitt, Dan Glickman's father and uncle. This one table was just reserved. It was a round table. It was just reserved for us. And so we had marvelous conversations with that. But I used to model various clothes for Henry's Christmas catalog, still pictures. Then all of a sudden, television started advertising. So one day, Henry's wanted me to model a boot. My desk in my office was just a tabletop with legs. So I was going to do this. They said, oh, no, that's not exciting enough. Let us figure out another site and we'll call you. The other site they called me was Cessna. They had me step up on a step on a private jet. Now you'd think that's not going to cause you any problem. It caused me all kind of problems.
Like what?
He's got a jet now. I go like, oh God. They used to pull open my coat, see what the label on my coat said. But it was fun.
Okay, let's talk again about your career as an architect. It started off with such turbulence in Wichita.
Right. After college, you had to work for registered firms before you could even take the exam. So I had worked 3 years for other firms.
As an architect?
As an architect. But they wouldn't let me go out and meet with the client. I'd design a building, they wouldn't let me go on a job site. They were members of the country clubs. If they had a firm luncheon at the country club, I couldn't go because they wouldn't let me in. So one day I just walked over and said, this is on a Wednesday. I said, Friday's my last day. The guy said, what? Well, what are you gonna do? I said, I'm not at liberty to say. I went home, walked in the house. My wife, who was teaching school at the time, Howard graduate, DC, Indiana. I said, baby, let's start packing, we're leaving. She said, okay, where are we going? I said, I don't know yet. Well, I had job offers in Los Angeles, New York, and Boston. So I spent the weekend just walking around. That Monday morning, I started making phone calls. I got a job offer in Boston, got a job offer in Los Angeles. I went down and talked to my dad. I was telling my dad all the things that was going on. He looked at me and he says, why are you not happy? I said, what? He said, why are you not happy? I said, Daddy, I want to put my name on the door. He said, let's do it. We found the second floor of a building that's still over at 600 North Main. It was in terrible shape. But my father and I repainted the whole second floor, built all the layout tables, made it an office. And so I got started. I had one job. It was in 1436 North Madison for the R.A. Eubanks residence. I submitted it for an award and didn't even know what the award was. About 3 weeks later, I got an envelope back. It said I won one of the 7 top national design awards. And the ceremony is going to be in Washington, D.C. But I didn't get anything else. But then I realized I didn't have enough money to go to Washington, D.C. So my mom and dad loaned us the money to fly to Washington, get the hotel. The day before I called and I said, this is Charles Mcafee. What else am I supposed to do when I come there? You didn't get the rest of the information? No. Our office is right down the street from the hotel, so when you get here in the morning, just come right down. I said, okay. So my wife and I walked down. We walked in the room. The receptionist was sitting there. She looked up at us, and she looked at me, and she says, are you Mr. Mcafee? And I said, yes. She jumped up and ran out of the room. I'm looking at my wife's looking at me. She's dragging another lady out. They're both staring at us. And one of them says, Dr. Weaver is going to be so proud. Well, Dr. Weaver would be the first African American to be ever selected for a president's cabinet. He was the first secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So she says, he's not here, but the deputy is there, and there's another award winner in getting his picture taken. As soon as he comes out, you go in and get yours taken. So the door opens, this guy walks out. He looks at me and he says, are you one of the award winners? I said, yes. He said, how old are you? I said, 29, and he smiled. He said, I remember those days. Well, I started to ask him if he had to borrow the money from his daddy to make the trip to get the award. But his name was I.M. Pei, who designed the world. He had won for Kips Bay in New York. Mies van der Rohe, who got run out of Germany, came to the United States and won twin towers on the lake shore in Chicago. And Skid Moores and Merrill, who did the original Fourth National here, for a project.
But after that first project that you won the award for, what happened next? How did it take off?
The award ceremony in Washington was at the downtown Hilton Hotel. They had a very large room, about 2,000 people. So they had Mies van der Rohe, I.M. Pei, Skid Moores and Merrill. Then they got the RAU Bank's residents, Wichita, Kansas, architect, Charles Mcafee. You could hear 2,000 people say, who, where? Nobody knew where Wichita was. But I was the only one that had won an award anywhere from the big cities. New York, Chicago, LA, Wichita. I had so much publicity. Within about 2 months, I had projects, housing projects, from Maine all the way to Texas. The first large housing project I did was a 125-unit apartment complex in Tulsa, which was probably the first largest project built after Tulsa was blown up by everybody. And so I did that. And then I was doing them in Texas, all over every place. But then there was a major project came out in Kansas City that I submitted a request for an interview. And I went up and I got selected. Mm-hmm. And the group that I met with, there were 4 African-American doctors who started this not-for-profit corporation. They added 3 other Kansas City businessmen. One was Miller Nichols, who developed the Plaza, a whole shopping, very famous shopping center.
As in Kansas City?
In Kansas City.
Right.
The second one was Henry Block from H&R Block.
Right.
The third one was Don Hall from Hallmark Cards. And this was, Nebraska was like #1 in the nation in football. So anytime I would interview, I'd always say, I went to Nebraska, get that out of the way, because anybody from KU and K-State gonna be mad in the first place. So I said, well, I went to the University of Nebraska, graduate university, and I went on to talk about what I'm doing. When I said that, I watched people real well. And when I said it, Don Hall did this. And I thought, what do you do that for? So after it was all over, he says, well, I'm going home tonight and tell my wife I met another outstanding corn hustler. I said, why is that? He said, she went to the University of Nebraska. I said, when? He said, she graduated in 1952. I said, I was there. He said, yeah, she went with some football player. I said, yeah, Bobby Reynolds. Oh, okay. But years later, we helped his wife set up the national meeting for United Negro College Fund Board of Directors, all of that. And another young woman that I did the Eubanks House for, she became the top reporter in Phoenix, Arizona, after graduating from KU. And she was the mistress of ceremonies for that program.
So you also set up satellite offices in Dallas and Atlanta.
Right.
And you were known to design building low-cost or low-income housing.
Right.
which building are you most proud of that you've designed, or buildings for that matter?
I don't have any favorite building. I always believe I've dedicated myself so much to every project I do that as a time when I'm doing it, that's my favorite.
So I have photos of some of the buildings that you've designed.
Mm-hmm.
I would like for you to briefly reflect on each one as I mention them to you.
Okay.
All right, so the Ulrich Museum of Art.
The Ulrich Museum, that wasn't the name when I originally got the contract. It was the McKnight Art Center.
Okay.
Once it got going and once it got designed and under construction, there was a man named Ulrich in New York who donated one tremendous large collection. That's how the museum part got the name Ulrich. Okay.
The Midtown Station in Atlanta.
The Midtown Station in Atlanta is one of those other stories. I was in Atlanta for an architects convention. This white guy walked up and he says, "Are you an architect?" I got things all over me say I'm an architect. I said, "Yeah. We need to hire black architects to design the subway system." There were only about 4 or 5 of us with 2,000 people at the convention. So I went to the meeting. He did the spiel. There was a black lady on one side, one black lady on the other side. And he finished and left. So they both said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Wichita, Kansas." The one said, "I'm from Emporia." I said, "No kidding. You go back to Wichita and write a letter, tell them you want to come for an interview." I did it, had an interview, made the short list. My brother was throwing up the first basketball. He was a coach at Morehouse College. The guy he's out on the court with to throw up the first basketball was Maynard Jackson, the mayor.
Right.
Maynard says to my brother, "Coach, tell your brother, don't worry about it. He got the job." I hadn't even been interviewed yet.
Wow. So what about Calvary Baptist Church in Wichita?
My wife and I both belonged there. My reflection on the church was, Urban Renewal came in and bought up Water Street, Main Street, which was the original black business district, wiped everybody out. So they moved over on this side of town.
Tell us about the R.A. Eubanks residence in Wichita.
That was the first house I ever did.
Right.
I was at a club one night. I don't drink. I was drinking a 7-Up. And Eubanks walked in and said, "Hey, man, how you doing? You want to sit down and have a drink with me?" I said, "No, I'm going to work on your house." He said, "What?" I said, "I'll see you." I went home. I had a 5-foot wide drafting table in my utility room next to the washer and dryer. And I started drawing. Early the next morning, my wife comes in and, "What are you singing about?" I said, "What do you mean, what am I singing about?" "What was I singing?" "You were singing design, Charlie, design." I said, "What?" I didn't realize it. I never changed not one line on that house. And there was a little man who taught me so much named Thornton Clark. Came from Mississippi, got a little training in construction, but he taught me respect for the materials I was going to use. Whatever was the size of a brick, size of a concrete block, what's the actual dimension of a 2x4. He taught me all that. He's the one that built the Eubanks house for me.
So you mentioned your daughter several times. She's an architect.
2 of them are architects.
2 of them. Wow.
The youngest one, graduate University of Nebraska undergraduate, University of Texas graduate, worked for a friend of mine on a project in Dallas. And one day she called me and said, "Daddy, it's time for us to open our Dallas office." I already had an Atlanta office and a Kansas City office. I said, "Oh, okay." So we opened an office in Dallas. My oldest daughter graduated Kansas State, went to Harvard with honors, graduated. I had to really struggle to get her out of Boston because she didn't want to leave. But my mama made the phone call and got her out. Said, "Your daddy needs you." But when I got the Olympics, I walked in the office and I looked at her and I said, baby, we got the Olympics. She said, Daddy, I'm out of here. Packed up her stuff, been in Atlanta ever since. Well, my middle daughter, who I think is the smartest of the three of them, she has a doctor's degree now, graduated KU, Texas, and Creighton. And she's a hospital administrator in California.
Do you still draw?
As best I can when I can stop this from shaking. I did a house on the west side of town a couple of years ago, and I drew. I've done a lot of things in my life that people honor about what I do. But there's one thing I want to tell you about, and I want to tell, this is my personal advertisement. I have a scar from here to there. I was blessed to be able to give my wife a kidney. Mm-hmm. Nothing comes that close to being important. Back then, the average age was about 9 years. It lasted almost 20 years.
Very good. So, how would you define Charles Mcafee? Who is he with all that you've done?
He's a guy that never wanted to give up on Wichita, Kansas. My great-grandpa would be upset with me if I did. I believe in the South.
And what would you like your legacy to be as an architect?
That I designed some really quality buildings. I've always said that if I had 10 projects a year, that's all I need as long as my clients were happy and satisfied with the quality of the work I did. And I've won a lot of design awards, so.
Mr. Charles Mcafee, it's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having
Thank you for asking.
Being on this program.
Thank you for asking.
Enjoy talking to you.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching. oneonone@kpts.org is our email address. That's if you have a question or comment. Until next time, I'm Victor Hogstrom. Be well, and I'll see you again soon.